All right, y'all, we're going to be kicking off this new year 2020 with some Raging Atheist Reacts videos, my new series. And I'm going to start getting these on Patreon immediately. And we're going to start with Nate and Sutton because so many of you have asked me to respond to them. What is up, you heathens and demons, you beautiful, blasphemous people? Welcome back to A Raging Atheist. I'm your boy Nakasuchi, and today I'm going to be doing my first ever reaction to Nate and Sutton. Now, people have been asking me to respond to these two for quite a while. I've been through their channel, and it's usually just a lot of boring Christian shit. I'm not sure where I stand on their ideology. Do I think that their ideology might be harmful? Are they preaching a harmful doctrine? I'm not quite sure about that, but so many have asked me to cover them that I feel like I should, because I've often said that I would if you ask, and I found a video that I want to cover. Now, this video is called Why We Believe in Jesus, and I've watched most of it, and I take issue with a lot of it. A lot of it's going to be stuff that I can't cut. 3, 2, 1. A lot of 3, 2, 1. A lot of it's going to be things that I can't claim too much knowledge to, but I will provide my insight and my reaction. So let's get started.
What's up, guys? Nate and Sutton back with another video, and today we are talking about our faith, Christianity.
Is it crazy to believe that there was a man named Jesus who actually lived, died, and then rose from the dead? Isn't believing in the Bible just based on myths and legends of something that happened and was written down thousands of years ago?
Now, I'm not gonna lie, like, that's my belief. I believe that it was myth, it was story created by the followers of a man, maybe, that wanted to keep the power that that man had brought them with his movement. I'm not sure, but that is my belief. And I think that you would really need to think outside of the box, the Christian box, to come to that belief. So I can understand why you, as Christians, wouldn't understand that belief because you haven't thought outside of that box yet. But I have, and I think a lot of atheists have come to this conclusion as well. Not all atheists. Atheists are a plethora of ideas. But I think a lot of us have come to this conclusion that it's a lot of myth, maybe based on some reality.
Our goal in this video is not to merely provide you with our opinion. Our goal is to provide you with a set of historical facts that lead to incredibly strong evidence that Jesus is who he said he is.
If you're someone who takes notes during our videos, get ready, because this one is packed with good info.
We're going to talk about his life, the reliability of the Gospels and New Testament, his skeptics, his miracles, fulfilled prophecies, and his death and resurrection.
All right, so I think that he is obviously better at reading from a script than she is. I think that you can really tell that she's reading from a script. Not talking smack here. I'm not too good at reading from a script, especially on camera. I'm a lot better at it when the camera's off and I'm just like using an avatar or something. So I'm not talking smack, but I do want to commend them on the quality of their video. I mean, it's really good editing. For a Christian video, it's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Now, I want to see what they have to say about all this crap that they just said that they were going to talk about.
Is there any proof that these things actually happened? Well, you might be surprised, so let's find out.
Real quick, just for spoiler's sake, this is going to be a 2-video response. This is almost a 16-minute video, so I'm going to go to 8 minutes with this first one, and then we'll have a second Raging Atheist reacts to Nate and Sutton. So, I should have put that at the beginning. You know, I'm rage. I'm not gonna. You guys have come to expect it, but let's continue.
To start off, we want to take a look at the New Testament Gospels, which, for those of you who don't know, are biographies of Jesus. The New Testament Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. How do we know that these Gospels are telling us the truth about Jesus and aren't just some man-made fairy tale? Many of you watching this may not accept the New Testament as being the inspired Word of God, but what you can't deny is that they are an ancient set of historical documents.
Well, I think that a lot of us do deny that. For one, the Gospels, I don't. I think they're just stories, as I put out, at the just a few minutes ago. I think that like historical documents are usually written by historians. Back then they had historians, they had scribes, people that actually wrote history, and the people that wrote the Gospels weren't that. Uh, like Luke, for instance, was homeboys with Paul, traveled with Paul, was a physician, not a historian. So yeah, I take issue with the fact that people try to claim that this is a historical document. And it's not like, the scholars don't agree. I think most scholars do agree. But I think that also in 2,000 years, it's very likely like a story like Harry Potter could be considered history. Just because you can write a thing doesn't make it true. But let's continue.
What we want to know is, are these historical documents reliable? And how do we know that they are accurate?
This may come as a surprise to many of you watching, but all of the New Testament Gospels were written in the 1st century, which is remarkably close to when Jesus was actually alive. The Gospel of Mark was the first, which was only written about 30 years after Jesus died.
I should look this stuff up. I'm sure that they're a bit off with this, but we'll give it to them that, that's the case. And it was about 30 years after he died before we have the first writings of Jesus. Now, my question would be, why wouldn't we have writings from Jesus himself? Could Jesus read and write? Was he illiterate? You would think that the Son of God, that God incarnate, could just, read and write. So why don't we have writings from Jesus himself? And why did it take 30 years? If this historical event actually happened, if Jesus rose from the dead and then, rose up into space without a spacesuit, why did it take 30 years for anybody to write about it? If zombies rose up from the dead the night that Jesus died in Jerusalem, why did it take 30 years for anybody to write about it? It doesn't make too much sense to me that it would take so long. It seems more logical that, the religion grew, and the leaders of the church, as it was starting to grow, made mythology. And I'm going to be talking about the faction around that time between Paul and James, the brother of Jesus. And I'm going to be talking about that in a video coming very soon. I've been working on it for quite a while.
And then Matthew, Luke, and John shortly after that.
What's crazy about this is that at the time of these writings, eyewitnesses of Jesus were still around. If these writers were passing along false information, if they were passing along unreliable history, we would expect eyewitnesses to say, wait a minute, this is not what actually happened. All of the
we actually did, and I'll be talking about that. That's that faction between James and Paul, because you had the eyewitnesses saying one thing, and then you had Paul's faction saying quite another. So we did have that, Nate.
gospel writers were either eyewitnesses or they were interviewing eyewitnesses to gain information about Jesus.
If you think about that in today's terms, 9/11 was almost 20 years ago. It would be very difficult for someone to be passing along historical writings about 9/11 that were not accurate, because everyone that lived through it would be there to confirm or disprove what they were passing along.
So clearly, Sutton here doesn't understand that there's a truther movement for 9/11, that there are people pushing misinformation and conspiracy theories about 9/11, and quite a lot of people believe in them. It's very easy to push misinformation out, and it is happening right now. So what she's telling you just isn't true. Maybe she should look into the truther movement. Maybe she should look at all of the misinformation that is out there about 9/11. It's really easy, with so many surviving people from 9/11, to put that misinformation out.
Now, a good way to test the New Testament Gospels is by seeing if there's any evidence outside of the New Testament that corroborates what the New Testament tells us. What's really cool is there is actually a remarkable amount of documents and corroboration outside of the New Testament. The writings of Josephus are among the most incredible. He was a Jewish historian in AD 93. He published the work called The Antiquities of the Jews, and this is one of his writings. Now,
All right, so they always go to Josephus, and it's funny because they use Josephus, but Josephus doesn't really back up their religious claims. He backs up their historic claims, but not their religious claims.
there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. Pilate condemned him to the cross. Those that loved him first did not forsake him, and the sect of Christians are named for him are not extinct to this day.
All right, so right there, where does it say that, Jesus rose from the dead? Where does it say he ascended into heaven? Where does it say he was the Son of God? A lot of people were put on the cross or crucified. Back then, Jesus was one of many. Where does it say anything supernatural about this man, Jesus, in what you just read from Josephus? Because I didn't see anything.
So that's pretty cool that here we have a reliable Jewish historian outside of the Bible confirming that there was a man named Jesus. And he was a man of wonderful works, and that he had followers who did not leave him, and that he was condemned to the cross.
So, changing gears a little, what about the miracles that the Bible claims Jesus performed? Is there any way to corroborate those?
No. It's 2,000 years later. I think she mispronounced corroborate, but I'm not going to give her too hard of a time because, I'm Naka and I mispronounce everything.
The Gospels claim that Jesus walked on water, healed the blind, raised the dead, and many other miracles. Really good evidence of this is that Jesus' contemporaries, which is people who liked him, people who were indifferent towards him, and even the people who opposed him, all acknowledged that he did extraordinary things. Now, of course, those who liked him and believed.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. We don't have any Roman records of Jesus doing extraordinary things. But I mean, this is another narrative that they like to put forward. I think that they probably believe this. They probably have been told this their entire life. I would suggest that they actually study history. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Put it down in the comments if I'm wrong.
In him said he did these extraordinary things because of the Spirit of God, while the people who opposed him would admit that he did amazing things, but they said that it was because the devil was helping him. The Talmud, which is not a biblical text, says that Jesus performed magic. So here we have another source outside the Bible confirming that Jesus did perform amazing signs, but they called it magic.
And maybe you should actually, try to find out the context of what they thought magic was back then in the Jewish society. I could be wrong about this, so if I'm wrong about this, again, put it in the comment section below. But I remember reading somewhere that the concept of magic wasn't what we think of today in Israel 2,000 years ago. That magic, wizards, sorcerers, those weren't people using, supernatural powers, but con people that would swindle Israelites. So, I maybe I'm wrong about that as well, but I do recall reading that. So, yeah, and I would need like citation as well about how all of them felt like that. Sure, I think the Gospels clearly do indicate that some Jewish people thought that Jesus was, being led by the devil, if you want to call it that. But I need citation that everybody thought that. You're talking about superstitious times when people truly believed that these supernatural things existed. We live in a different time now, and as a skeptic, I need evidence of what you're speaking. And if you don't have evidence to provide that, then you need to do what I do and say, hey, I might be wrong, but this is what I believe.
Because these people did not believe he was from God. However, they are acknowledging that he did perform extraordinary miracles.
I once heard a story of a man who wrote down this verse, and he took it to his work and read it to all of his coworkers and asked them, who is this verse talking about? The verse reads, "He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him. And by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." And everyone's response was immediately, "Yeah, that's talking about Jesus from the New Testament." And then the man excitedly responded, "No, it's not from the New Testament. It's from the Old Testament," and was
I don't really even see anything in that would make me automatically assume it's talking about Jesus Christ. The Jews did have prophecies for a Messiah. The Jews themselves don't think that Messiah has come yet. You're the ones that think that this Jesus character was that Messiah. So, that's the conflict, right? That's the conflict. And again, this is just something that Christians use because they don't truly understand the nuances of it all. They think that this is talking directly about Jesus because, they've been told their whole life it's talking directly about Jesus. But you go and ask any Jewish person, or most Jewish people will tell you, no, it wasn't talking about Jesus.
It was written 8 centuries before Jesus even came.
And you can Google this. This verse was written in Isaiah 53, 5-6, prophesying Jesus hundreds of years earlier. And so this brings us to one of the most amazing things we find about the Bible, which is that against all mathematical odds, Jesus fulfilled dozens of prophecies that were written centuries before he was born.
That's kind of what a Messiah needs to do. If you want to become the Messiah, you have to fulfill the prophecies. It's what makes them circular, right? Like, the prophecies are laid out, so you try to fulfill them. If you can fulfill them all, then you become this Messiah. Haven't you ever read, Wheel of Time? Haven't you ever read the Belgariad? Haven't you ever read any fucking fantasy novel that will give you this construct of gods and the relationships of their messiahs? Of prophecy and fulfilling them? Obviously not.
Scholars have determined that Jesus fulfilled at least 4 dozen major prophecies.
Some skeptics claim that he somehow engineered this, or that they were self-fulfilling prophecies, which is really quite silly because some of these prophecies were ones he couldn't have possibly fabricated, such as being born of a virgin in Bethlehem, or
plenty of people born in Bethlehem every day, yo. Plenty of opportunities for that to come out of Bethlehem.
or living as a suffering servant. These would have been
Plenty of poor people living as suffering servants in Israel. Plenty of poor people living as suffering servants in Bethlehem. It's not an impossible thing, yo.
been quite difficult to engineer.
I do think that it is contested on whether or not he was actually born in Bethlehem, or if there, because history doesn't show a consensus at that time, right?
Other prophecies include that the Messiah's ministry will begin in Galilee. He will perform miracles, rise from the dead, be betrayed by a friend, die a violent death, and one of my favorites in Zechariah 9:9, the Messiah will ride into Jerusalem on a donkey, which was written 500 years earlier.
Yeah, so I wonder in that 500-year span of time, how many motherfuckers try to ride up into Jerusalem on a fucking donkey? Can you give me that number, Nate?
The reason I love this one so much is if you look at a donkey's back, there's actually a black cross on it.
Oh, and the F word slipped out. I was doing good. And then the F word slipped out because, stupidity.
And what's really incredible is that one of the prophecies written in Psalm 22:16 was, "Dogs have surrounded me. A band of evil men has encircled me. They have pierced my hands and my feet." This was written about 300 years before crucifixion was even invented.
And while Jesus
I need the context of that. I need the context of that scripture. I need the context of that verse. And again, you're talking about barbarous times. So even if you're saying it was before crucifixion was invented, again, I would need citation of that. I don't know. I haven't looked into that. But, I would need citation. But just because crucifixion hadn't been birthed yet doesn't mean people weren't being pierced through their hands and their feet. That's just stupid.
was here on earth, he made some really radical claims. He claimed to be the Son of God, and he claimed that the only way we could get to God would be through him, and that him and God were the same being. Now, anyone can make these claims, but what proof do they have? You can claim to be God, I can claim to be God, but
Exactly, and what proof do you have outside of the Bible and all this crazy stuff you're spitting? Like, I haven't seen much citation of any of the things that you're saying at all. Now, I'm not talking smack. I don't provide links or citations either. I need to get better about that. People ask me and ask me and ask me, and I can't fit it into my routine. I'm not talking too much smack, but I'm just saying, like, what evidence do you have that all of this shit is real that you're talking about? And how can you even truly trust a historical record that's usually written by the victors of war? How can you not just use your own rational mind to deduct, what is real and what is not, to realize that people, human beings, don't raise from the dead, human beings don't become gods? This is just common sense type of shit to me, but for some reason, as I've said in the past, my beliefs are the minority. I don't fucking get it.
it doesn't really mean anything. However, if Jesus claimed to be God and died and rose from the dead, well, that's pretty good evidence that what he was claiming was true. So as you can see, the resurrection of Jesus really is the pivotal point of Christianity. That's why Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 15:17, "And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile."
Yeah, and again, I need evidence that he was raised. I don't know if you've ever heard of the empty tomb, but the tomb was empty. Nobody saw him raised from the dead. People have claimed to see him later. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. There's conspiracy theories that he didn't die on the cross. There's conspiracy theories that he had a child with Mary of Magdalene. All these different theories. I maintain that I wasn't there. I maintain that a human being doesn't raise from the dead 3 days after they're dead. If I'm wrong, put a comment in the comment section below, citate that shit, and I'll correct myself. Human beings don't just fly up into space. Human beings don't exist in space without a spacesuit. All of these things, no record of Jews raising from the dead when Jesus died. No Roman record of Jesus committing miracles. None of this stuff. We know that there was a movement, and we know that there were plenty of people trying to be the Messiah back then. That's what we know. But we're only halfway through this video, so the next Raging Atheist Reacts is going to be part 2 to this. As always, I'm your boy Nakasuchi. This is a Raging Atheist. If you like my videos, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share me on your social media, comment in the comment section below, hit that bell so you're notified every time I make a new video or every time I have a new live stream. I'll see you soon.